Hey everyone, Gary Schoniger here. Welcome to the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program webinar. This is about the Entrepreneurial Mindset 101 and some insights into the Ice House program philosophy, the course structure, and some of the best use cases. So thanks for joining today. I want to get started. A couple of little housekeeping things before we jump in. What I like to do in these webinars is if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat function there. And what I'd like everyone to do is just jump in on the chat function and say hello and let us know where you're from, just as a way to kind of kick this off and get this conversation started. So we've got about 150 people signed on for this webinar. So I'm really grateful for all of you taking time out of your busy days to join in. There we go. Hey, we got some folks from Pittsburgh, Exton, PA, Pennsylvania, Rhinelander, Saskatchewan, Canada. Awesome. More folks from PA, Tacoma, Washington, New York, Columbia, South Carolina. Awesome. More folks from PA. This is great. Washington State, Elgin Community College near Chicago. Great to hear from folks at Elgin again. Exton, PA. Atlanta, Georgia. All right, welcome. So we're going to have some fun on this webinar. I'm going to talk about, let me get this thing started here. So you see where the chat function is. I'm going to go through some slides and do a brief overview of the Ice House program and then leave some time open for Q&A. And there's my dear friend Cheryl from Australia. Cheryl just attended one of our public facilitator trainings very recently in Houston, Texas, about 3 weeks ago. And very exciting to have you on this webinar again, Cheryl. Thank you. So you see the chat function on the side. I'm going to go ahead and pull full screen on my slides. And if you can hold your questions or comments till we get to the end, then we'll have plenty of time for the Q&A and the interface. So let me share my desktop and let's jump right in. All right, so I want to put how to figure out how to get my my chat function back up there. It won't show. There it is. I want to show the chat function just so I can keep an eye on things. So my colleague Nick Hool is also on the call from the Eli office. Something goes wrong, we'll be able to get it right back up if we have any snafus with technology or whatever. So there's David Clark from Washington State, more folks from Elgin Community College. Excellent. So West Virginia, that's fabulous. We've got a lot of good things happening in West Virginia here. All right, I'm going to dive in. So Entrepreneurial Mindset 101, the introduction to the Ice House Entrepreneurship Programs, philosophy, features, and impact. So I'm off to a bad start already. So here's who we are. We're the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. My name is Gary Schoniger. I'm the founder and CEO. Our focus is entrepreneurial mindset education programs, keynotes, workshops, training, and professional development for individuals, organizations, and academic institutions worldwide. That's what we do. Our focus is on the entrepreneurial mindset. So we're coming from a perspective that the world has changed in ways that now require everyone to think like an entrepreneur. And I've obviously italicized that word, think like an entrepreneur, because I don't mean to say that everyone needs to start a business. What I do mean to say is that everyone can benefit from learning how to think like an entrepreneur. The challenge that we face is that our ability to embrace entrepreneurial thinking is limited by the ways in which we define it. And you know, most of you, I'm sure, are familiar. There are many entrepreneurship educations initiatives popping up in colleges, universities, small business development centers around the world. Most of these efforts are focused on either the high growth model of entrepreneurship or the Main Street small business owner. And you know, I'll say a few things about that. as far as like the Silicon Valley venture-backed high-growth entrepreneurship, I think that's really, really overrepresented in the college and universities. I mean, statistically, the venture-backed startups are very, very, they're anomalies. They're statistical anomalies. And we need high-growth, high-tech entrepreneurs. The point that I'm making here is that for the vast majority of either students or workers or anyone, that model is either irrelevant or it's unrealistic and out of reach. A lot of the small business development efforts are really focused on sort of a Main Street small business ownership. People are taught how to write business plans and conduct market research, figure out the basic mechanical aspects of running a business and taught basic managerial skills. But they're really conflating entrepreneurial attitudes, behaviors, and skills with entrepreneurial with managerial. And so one of the things I'd like to talk about on this webinar is sort of making this distinction between the entrepreneurial and managerial skills. And once you disentangle those two things, suddenly you realize that anyone can be innovative and entrepreneurial. You don't really need to start a business in order to do that. So the two questions I really want to address in this webinar is what is entrepreneurship and what is a mindset? So in order to understand what an entrepreneurial mindset is, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to sort of break this apart and look at it distinctly. So, historically, entrepreneurship has been described as, or an entrepreneur, I should say, is someone who starts and operates a business. I mean, that's the basic definition going back to the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. More recently, the Harvard Business School professor Howard Stevenson's definition is the most often cited, in which he defines entrepreneurship as the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources controlled. And I have sort of a love-hate relationship with this definition because it's accurate, but it's a little bit clunky and obscure. And so part of what we've done in our research is interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs around the world: Latin America, North America, South Africa, Eastern Europe, UK. We've interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs, and when we look closely at what they're really doing, we can sort of land on this broad and simple definition of entrepreneurship as an opportunity discovery process. The 2 points that I want to make here are, this is a simple definition that invites everyone into the conversation. Not everyone wants to start a business, but we all want to be engaged in work that matters. We all want to discover new opportunities. We all want to see our efforts lead towards a more meaningful and prosperous life. So I like that definition because it sort of breaks it open to everyone. You don't need to have a desire to start a business to embrace this definition. And that's the simpleness of it sort of makes it accessible to everyone. So when we look at what entrepreneurs are actually doing in this opportunity discovery process, well, let me back up for a second, because the second thing I wanted to say from this slide is that the attitudes, behaviors, and skills required to discover an opportunity are quite distinct from the attitudes, behaviors, and skills required to exploit an opportunity. And I would say, opportunity discovery skills are entrepreneurial skills, and the skills required to exploit that are more managerial skills. So I think it's really important to sort of disentangle the entrepreneurial from the managerial. All right, so now what I wanted to go over here briefly is what does opportunity discovery require? It requires skills that anyone can learn to develop. As you look at these, you'll recognize them as skills that our systems of education and our organizational structures have historically undervalued, overlooked, or ignored. more importantly, what I'd like to point out is that these are attitudes, behaviors, and skills that anyone can learn to develop. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to have an MBA. These are more or less IQ independent, resource independent, situation independent attitudes and skills. So the basic definition of entrepreneurship is an opportunity discovery process. And I don't imagine there's anyone on this webinar that doesn't want to discover an opportunity. So now let's look at the question of what is a mindset. And this is, I go back and forth in my thinking on this. I would say, like, understanding the mindset is at least as important as understanding entrepreneurship. And this word mindset is tossed around, colloquially, but there's not any real clinical definition of a mindset. And I'll spare you my longer form definition of a mindset, but this is sort of an amorphous concept that's worthy of a little bit of a deeper dive. So my, sort of back of a napkin definition of a mindset is the underlying beliefs and tacit assumptions that drive our behavior. I'm underlining, or excuse me, I'm accentuating the word underlying because the point here is that much of our mindset operates beneath our conscious awareness, right? As Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So a mindset is basically a belief system. And I think this is a useful way to think of a mindset as a belief system that is perfectly designed to create the outcomes that it's creating. And so, in our formal trainings and workshops, we'll do a much deeper dive into a mindset, but it operates sort of like a self sustaining software. It reaches into the past to navigate the future. And so, our mindset becomes this belief system that we assume to be the correct way of feeling, thinking, and acting as we approach problems and solve problems and integrate ourselves into the world. Having interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs, their behavior seems to come down to one core belief, or maybe I would call it a tacit assumption. Tacit meaning they're not really aware of it consciously, or it's not fully conscious. And that assumption is that it's my responsibility to figure out how to make myself useful to other humans, and that by doing so, I can empower myself. And so we think of this as sort of the core assumption that drives entrepreneurial activity. Now, one point here that I just want to bring out is this, what this sort of brings forth is this, what is an employee mindset, right? Again, there's a deeply held, mostly unconscious assumption that I'm going to get a credential and I'm going to expect to work in an established organization where the useful thing has already been determined by others. And I will expect to fulfill a predetermined, well-defined role. And, as Thomas Friedman said in his most recent book, Thank You for Being Late, the industrial era mindset that helped us build America is not going to get us where we need to go. And so I'd just like to point out that, in order to really understand an entrepreneurial mindset, we have to sort of contemplate what is a non-entrepreneurial mindset, or what is an employee mindset. So what we see in entrepreneurs, in experienced entrepreneurs, we look at these 5 mechanisms, which I refer to as mechanisms of human agency or mechanisms of individual agency. What we tend to see in experienced entrepreneurs is a high degree of self-efficacy. And again, most of this is not consciously, the entrepreneurs are not consciously aware of it. Okay, so high degree of self-efficacy. This is Albert Bandura's term. This is sort of a domain-specific sense of confidence. So, we think of this on a sort of a scale with mastery on one end and learned helplessness on the other, right? So what we tend to see in experienced entrepreneurs is a high degree of self-efficacy, a deeply held belief that I can achieve the goals that I set for myself, essentially, as opposed to someone who has learned helplessness, who believes that they're incapable of achieving their goals. So we tend to see an internal locus of control, and this is a deeply held, mostly unconscious belief that I am in control of my life. I am making my own decisions and responsible for my own outcomes, as opposed to someone who has an external locus of control, has a deeply held, mostly unconscious belief that fate, luck, circumstances, or powerful others are somehow controlling my life. We tend to see intrinsic motivation in the entrepreneur, and that means they are motivated by the task itself as opposed to someone who is extrinsically motivated by a separable reward, right? So people who are extrinsically motivated are those who are doing something for money, for letter grades, for praise, for fame. Those are separable rewards. So entrepreneurs tend to be intrinsically motivated. The task itself brings the reward. We looked at the research here. It's very clear. A meta-analysis of the psychological literature demonstrates that people who are intrinsically motivated tend to outperform people who are extrinsically motivated across a whole breadth of domains. We also tend to see a high degree of resiliency in experienced entrepreneurs. And we know from the work of Martin Seligman and others in the field of positive psychology that resiliency comes from optimism, from an optimistic explanatory style. This is a deeply held belief that when I find myself in some sort of an adverse circumstance, that I can get myself out of it, that it's temporary, that it's fixable, or that it's local. That's, opposed to someone who has a pessimistic explanatory style. When they face challenges, they tend to tell themselves, this is permanent, this always happens to me, this is unfixable. And the research in resiliency and learned optimism is quite extraordinary. All I'll say about that for now is that those who have an optimistic explanatory style, those who learn to optimistically interpret adversity, become stronger, happier, and healthier than people who have never suffered adversity in the first place. So, and lastly, what we tend to see in experienced entrepreneurs is a growth mindset. That is the belief that I can develop the skills, the knowledge, the intelligence I need to get where I need to go, as opposed to someone who has a deeply held belief in a fixed mindset, whereas my talent, my intelligence or talent, my abilities are fixed. There's nothing they can do about it, that we can do about that. Now, the difference between a fixed growth mindset, the real impact is in the goals that one sets for oneself, depend very widely depending on this mindset. The point I want to make here is that these are mostly the effects of being entrepreneurial rather than the cause. And that's where we often get this wrong. We see experienced entrepreneurs, they have these attributes. We tend to see them as innate traits, and we forget that when the entrepreneur began, they had very little of this. It was actually the compelling goal that they were pursuing. They developed these attributes of human agency as a result of pursuing a compelling goal. All right, so that's sort of the definition of the mindset as the underlying beliefs that drive our behavior. So entrepreneurship is an opportunity discovery process. When we put those two words together and think about what is an entrepreneurial mindset, it's really this underlying belief, again, as I said a moment ago, that it's my responsibility to figure out how to make myself useful to others. And that by doing so, I can empower myself. So I think of this as sort of an enlightened self-interest. It's sort of a very simple underlying concept that is very easy to overlook. All right, so I'm going to move on now and talk to you a little bit about the Ice House program and how this came to be. In 2007, early in 2007, I got hired by the Cisco Entrepreneur Institute in San Jose, California, to do some research on the entrepreneurship education ecosystem in the United States. And one of the things that we found straight away was that the way entrepreneurship is being characterized in classrooms and small business development centers and initiatives across the country was largely disconnected or divorced from the reality of what a typical entrepreneur was actually doing. And so Cisco gave us the platform to go across the United States and interview hundreds of entrepreneurs. And you know, what we found was that there was no curriculum anywhere that could even remotely explain how entrepreneurs did what they did. Because what we found was they weren't spending a lot of time writing business plans. They didn't have a lot of money. They weren't doing a lot of planning. They didn't even have a lot of experience. And we found this to be true in other research done from a guy from Harvard named Amir Bideh, found very similar results in Inc. 500 companies. So that's part of how we created, why we created the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program, to sort of look underneath the hood and look more closely at what is the typical entrepreneur actually doing. And so I went around the United States. I spent about a year interviewing entrepreneurs. And one story I'll just tell you that really caught my attention was the story I heard from Clifton Taulbert about his uncle Cleve. And I met Clifton in Tulsa in 2007, I believe it was. And all I knew was that he was one of the founders of the Stairmaster exercise company. And I asked him how he learned how to think like an entrepreneur. He explained to me that he was born in a very poor cotton community in the Mississippi Delta. He was born in the 1940s to a teenage mom, didn't know a father, and he was raised by his relatives. He was picking cotton. He said that was the expected way of life for people that looked like me in this place and time. And at the age of 13, he went to work for his uncle Cleve, the man who owned the local ice house. And he pulled this picture out of a shoebox and showed it to me. And I instantly connected with this story. And as Clifton began to sort of articulate the lessons he was learning from his uncle Cleve, I soon began to realize that sort of these universal concepts that I had been hearing from hundreds of entrepreneurs. They transcend time, gender, culture, socioeconomics. There are these core concepts that became the basis of the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program. So about a year and a half later, I convinced Clifton to co-author a book, which we did. It's called Who Owns the Ice House? 8 Life Lessons from an Unlikely Entrepreneur. It's the distillation of these 8 core concepts that I'll get into in a moment from hundreds of interviews we've conducted now around the world. So also With some initial funding from the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, we created the Ice House Entrepreneurship Programs. And so I'll get into that in just a minute. Just to point out here that there's an original edition there we've modified into a student success edition designed to help students succeed in college, high school, whatever, to succeed in academically and in the broader world in their careers. There's also a small business edition, which is the original edition, which has been reduced in time and size. That's specifically for people that want to start a business. So some straightforward course objectives. We wanted to inspire the students with real world examples. We want to engage them in the real world, immerse them in the entrepreneurial process. We wanted to focus on the mindset, the broad applicability. And I don't mean to ignore the startup world, because that's really, really important, but also focus on the broader applicability of the entrepreneurial mindset beyond the small business or the venture-backed startup world. We designed the program so in order to connect the classroom and the community, to encourage the students and the facilitators to identify and interact with local entrepreneurials that they can invite into the learning experience. Lastly, we wanted to develop a program that required facilitation rather than instruction. And there's a good reason for that, a couple good reasons for that. But one point I wanted to make is that in our research with Cisco, what we found is that the most effective programs required a serial entrepreneur to teach it. And we realized like that's not going to be scalable. We're not going to be able to make an impact in our schools and our communities if teaching these programs requires a very highly experienced entrepreneur practitioner. Well, as it turns out, if we define entrepreneurship as a discovery process, you can't really instruct discovery, you can facilitate it. So we created the Ice House program in a way that anyone can teach it without having any real entrepreneurial experience. You don't need to be an expert in entrepreneurship in order to effectively deliver the program. So the program relies on 4 basic learning models, which the educators who are on this webinar will recognize. It relies on experiential learning, which is exactly what entrepreneurs do in the wild. It's project-based learning. Again, that's what entrepreneurs do. It's peer-to-peer learning in that they're teaching each other, and it's self-directed. There's no one telling the individual exactly what to learn and do and figure out. It's all self-directed learning. So the course is designed to emulate these core concepts. Most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with design thinking and the business model canvas, which we sort of mashed up and created what we call the Ice House Opportunity Discovery Canvas. It's a very simple tool, draws from the best practices in design thinking to help students through the experiential problem-based portion of the program. We also feature short video vignettes throughout the course that enable the students to learn from other unlikely entrepreneurs. And there's a point I'd like to make here that for the vast majority, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Richard Branson, these are not relatable social models. And in order for people to adopt a new behavior, they need to see people from similar or worse circumstances who are succeeding in this domain. So we've installed or inserted these little video vignettes throughout the program so that these everyday unlikely entrepreneurs, most of whom came from, serious disadvantage or challenge backgrounds, they sort of reinforce the core concepts with their own stories. So let me get into the 8 life lessons here briefly, and then we can wrap up, and I'll tell you a little bit about how the program is being used around the world. So the 8 concepts that we distilled from hundreds of interviews, and this is sort of an ethnographic research project that I undertook starting in 2007. What we see in entrepreneurs primarily, and sort of as the foundation, is what we call the power to choose. And what the entrepreneurs are doing without realizing it is they're tapping into a great power by pursuing a compelling goal. They're choosing the future rather than allowing it to happen to them. And, you know, we looked at research from Pennebaker on self-authoring. We've looked at research from Schneider and others in hope theory, right? The belief that the future will be better than the present, combined with the belief that I have the power to make it so. So what we hear entrepreneurs talk about is some sort of a vision, something compelling. Maybe they're trying to escape something awful, or they're trying to approach something very compelling. But there's something they're trying to get to on the horizon, and that orients them towards a future positive orientation. And the research here is quite interesting about our time orientation. Philip Zimbardo was kind of leading the charge there at Stanford. But so there's a future positive orientation. That's sort of the foundation. And what we hear from entrepreneurs is they have some kind of a compelling goal. That's a quick summary. They tend to look at problems as opportunities. So they're operating from this idea that I've got to figure out how to solve problems for other people, and that's how I empower myself. So while the rest of us are sort of hunkered down trying to get our own needs met, the entrepreneurs tend to look around and see problems, frustrations, unmet needs as potential opportunities. And this is a subtle but radical shift in orientation, right? As I said, most of us are trying to get through our day-to-day lives getting our own needs met. And it doesn't always occur to us to figure out what to help other people get their needs met. And the other interesting point that I'll make here is that, you know, many of the entrepreneurs we've interviewed failed before they succeeded. And an important distinction here is that those that fail tend to find a solution and then they go looking for a problem. Where the entrepreneurs who succeed, they tend to find the problem first and then they develop a solution. It's a really important point. They tend to be action-oriented, and to the uninitiated, this looks like either, you know, an inherent proclivity for risk, or to others, it looks like unbridled discipline, undisciplined enthusiasm. And really, what the entrepreneurs are doing is micro-experimenting. They have a bias towards action. Because they don't have a lot of resources, they learn to design and conduct these micro-experiments that enable them to tease out opportunities that larger companies would just overlook. So this bias towards action is really a trial and error approach on a very micro scale that enables them to identify opportunities that the rest of us overlook. Just this morning, I published a piece on this. It's in my LinkedIn profile. You can find it there. It's also on the Eli blog, elimindset.com. So we also notice in entrepreneurs that they're voracious lifelong learners. They're learning from each other. They're learning from webinars. They're learning from, you know, audiobooks or reading or podcasts or courses or whatever. But they seem to all have this understanding of the more knowledge I have, the better my understanding of the world, the more problems I can solve. So there's an innate, active sense of curiosity, I suppose is what I mean to say. we see this recognition of opportunities or looking for problems to be solved, testing ideas, and constantly learning. That's the flywheel. That's the core. When I step back and think about it, we think of entrepreneurs as lucky, or they're geniuses, or they have some scientifically inventive abilities. It's really simple. You got to be looking for problems to solve. You got to be trying things, and you got to be learning things. I mean, that's really the core of entrepreneurial activity. So, as sort of the secondary components, we tend to see in entrepreneurs that they are very resourceful. They understand the difference between spending and investing, their time, their thought, their money, whatever. They're very, very resourceful. And there's some really interesting financial literacy components that are embedded in lesson 5. The core concept there is we're introducing to participants, again, back to the mindset, do you want to appear wealthy or do you want to be wealthy? Because for most of us, those two things are sort of competing with each other. They're at odds with each other. And that's one of the powerful lessons that came from Clifton's story. We also see in entrepreneurs that they're very reliable. They tend to do what they say they're going to do. In order to solve problems for other people, you need to be reliable, or the whole thing collapses. So there tends to be an understanding that we must do what we say we're going to do, when we say we're going to do it, for the price we agreed to do it. There's just sort of a consistency and a reliability in their brand. We also tend to see that they are networked. They create their own intentional communities. They reach out, they create support network of others who are on a similar path, right? There's like a root system in a forest. They create a community-based support network to support each other. One of the points I will, for those of you who are in the business of encouraging and teaching, supporting entrepreneurship, there are Uncle Cleves, there are Ice House entrepreneurs in every community, and for the most part, they're going ignored. They'll help if we ask them. In a lot of cases, we're just not asking. Okay, and so lastly, what we see in experienced entrepreneurs is this resilience, is a tendency to be persistent. They just don't give up when they face rejection. They don't blame others for their faults. They get back up. They figure what they can change and what they can't. They learn from their mistakes and they keep going. And so this is a very, very brief overview. In those of you, Cheryl, there are some folks on this webinar that have been through our training. They can attest to the fact that there is a tremendous amount of depth and rigor and research in each of these 8 concepts. I'm just very briefly skimming over them for this webinar. So since we launched the Ice House program in 2011 with initial funding from the Kauffman Foundation, the Ice House programs have gone all over the world, been adopted in ways I could never have imagined. They're being used in middle schools and high schools, community colleges, 4-year universities, economic development and veteran initiatives, small business development centers, reentry programs, workforce development efforts, and nonprofit organizations around the world. I'm going to tell you about a few of these. Recently, in Erie, Pennsylvania, a local nonprofit launched an 850 student pilot through a partnership with United Way. 7th grade students. We've trained 30 teachers there in the school system, several of whom rolled up their sleeves and adopted the program for 7th grade students. The outcomes were nothing short of astonishing. These kids were coming up with ideas. They were solving problems. The other teachers were blown away by not only the ideas these kids were coming up with, but the level of engagement and problem solving they were doing. And there's a video they made about the project. If you Google search Ice House Erie, E-R-I-E, you can see that video. High schools. One of our biggest high schools is a partnership with a high school system across Mexico named Prepa Tech. This is a private high school feeder system for Tecnológico de Monterrey, which is a very prestigious entrepreneurial university system across Mexico. It's been named one of the most entrepreneurial universities in the world. Each year, about 7,500 students in their final semester of high school are going through the Ice House Student Success Program. There's some of the results here on the slide. There's a full report you can download on our website if you want to learn more about that. So one of our most astonishing findings was the way in which the Ice House program, the impact it has on student persistence. So in the community college realm, about half the students that show up for the first semester do not return for the second semester, about half. And Dr. Lance Bolton led a study. We did about 1,000 students randomly selected into the Ice House program as a student success course. What we saw was a 28% increase in student persistence against the control group. 28% of the students increase of students persisting from the first to second semester. So also in workforce development, this is another one that surprised me. And the city of Albuquerque began to use our course to train city government workers how to be more innovative and entrepreneurial. And they engaged with the certified Ice House facilitator, Tom Darling from Central New Mexico Community College. They then recruited him. They're now in the process of training 6,000 city government workers. There are videos. If you go to mindsetmemo.com, you can see the videos. It's really nothing short of astonishing the way in which Tom and his team are transforming the culture in city government in Albuquerque with the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program, and be happy to put you in touch with Tom if you're interested to learn more about that. So the Ice House program has been recognized around the world, across the United States. It's been featured on NPR, CNN Money, USA Today, the Huffington Post. We're starting now to see statewide rollouts. We're in the middle of a project with all 9 career and technical community colleges in the state of West Virginia through a scholarship with the Kauffman Foundation. We've trained about 50 educators there who are going to deploy. All 9 career and technical college presidents have signed on to deploy the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program in all 9 community colleges across West Virginia. So we're also in the midst of a statewide initiative funded by NCID. It's led by Tom Rue. He's the former vice president of entrepreneurship at the Kauffman Foundation. He's leading this initiative at NCID in North Carolina to put 100,000 North Carolinians through the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program. And we have so far trained about 50 people from nonprofits, high schools, community colleges, 4-year universities, economic development organizations, veteran initiatives. We're going to do another training there next week in North Carolina, and to train another cohort of 50 people from across North Carolina who are then authorized to train to bring the program back into their communities. All right, so how did I do here? About 45 minutes, I'm right about there. So that's a quick overview of the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program. If you want to learn more, about this program to become a certified facilitator, our next public training is in June at St. Charles, Missouri, which is just outside of St. Louis, Missouri, hosted at Lindenwood University. We also do one-day professional development workshops for many colleges and universities just to expose the broader faculty to, what is entrepreneurship, what is a mindset, why does it matter, and how can we infuse these ideas across the curriculum into the learning experience. So we do a lot of one-day workshops. We also are doing a lot of on-site Ice House facilitator training, the 3-day Ice House facilitator training for individual universities or organizations across the United States and around the world. We're going to be going back to Cape Town, South Africa in April to do our second training there through a partnership with the Alan Gray Orbis Foundation, which we're very excited about. So we've also just recently released the retail version of the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program. It's sort of a consumer version of it. It's in a very simple learning management system. So this is meant for people that can just want to take the program on their own. You don't need to be trained. You can just sign up and take the course. You can enroll right now. We're seeing really positive reviews from that. For those who are signed up for this webinar, we're going to send you a 20% discount code in a follow-up email along with all these slides, a discount code for the Ice House program, and more information about our trainings and so forth. So, of course, there's a lot more to learn on our website at elimindset.com. I'm going to stop talking right now. I'm sure that we covered a lot of ground there, but I want to open up for questions and see what you guys have to say about this. How does this understanding of entrepreneurship and a mindset fit into your understanding? How does it fit into your work? Is this helpful to you? Do you need to learn more about, whatever your questions are? I'm happy to take them. So Charles is saying, I'm in North Carolina. I would like to connect to the North Carolina program that you spoke of. Charles, I think there's a link on our website. If you just Google search NC IDEA, Ice House, there's an application. It's open. I think they have a few seats left. At the very worst, if you can't find it, reach out to us at Eli Mindset, and we'll make sure that you're connected to that. What other questions do you have? So I know I was talking very fast there, but I couldn't have answered all your questions. David Clark, just want to say I love you. The Ice House course changed my life. Wow. We'll be learning much more. Thanks for this meeting in an honor. Thank you, David. It's so humbling when I hear these things, and to me, it's what Ice House entrepreneurship is really about, David, is people are now using the word Ice House as a verb, like let's Ice House this. This is really about how do people who have no particular authority in life, they don't have resources, they don't have an advantage, they don't have MBAs from prestigious universities, how do ordinary people make a difference in the world and improve the quality of their life? That's what this is really about. So thank you for that comment, David. I very much appreciate that. Can a parent use this with a homeschool student? Absolutely. Juanita, there is one of the facilitators who's also featured in the program. Her name is Serena Thomas. Be happy to connect with her. She is a homeschool mom. She's also one of the featured entrepreneurs in the course. And I'd be happy to connect you with her. In order to do that, you can just use the the consumer version of the program, like the non-academic version, that will send you a 20% a discount code to go in and use that. So Nancy is asking, what are costs involved after a facilitator is certified to use the program materials? Nancy, I'm glad you asked that question. So I'm going to try to unpack this, and if it gets confusing, stop me or ask whatever questions. So on the very most easily accessed end of this, you can buy a book for $10 or $12 on Amazon, or you can buy them from us directly from our bookstore. We give a 30% discount when you buy more than 30 books. So you can buy the book. We've put discussion guides on our website you can download for free. At the beginning of each of the 8 lessons, there's a little video from Clifton Taulbert talking about his Uncle Cleve. That's the entry-level program. Next level up is there's a teacher classroom kit. It costs $495. The teacher has access to all of the course materials, a very robust facilitator manual, 10 hours of video, exercises, a lot of stuff. But the student doesn't get anything. If you want the student to buy the book, that would be helpful. So the classroom kit's $495. You can use that for as many students as you want for a single year, for a 12-month period. The upgrade from that is a student license, and this is what is being used in community colleges, 4-year universities, some private high schools, where the students have access. They each have an individual license, and the course is delivered in a blended format. This is also what coaching consultants are using in learning and development space, people who are taking this out into the professional development and workforce development world. So an individual student license is $99. That's access to all the course content, a digital copy of the book. If you want to get a printed copy, you can get that from us, or you can get it on Amazon or at your local bookstore or whatever. So it goes from the cost of a book to $495 you can teach it to as many students as you want in a year. If you want to use the individual student licenses, those are $99 each. Now, we also are working on institutional licenses, where it's like a software as services, where a school system can license and have access to all of it for all students all year. We also have volume discounts on the individual student licenses. So you'd have to connect with us to figure out how many students you're using and how you want to use it. We'd be happy to help you with that. Okay, so Bill is asking, where can I get more information about using Ice House for high school summer program? It's an awesome idea, Bill. I would say to reach out to Nick, N-I-C, at elimindset.com. He is our resident expert. He can connect you with facilitators who are already doing something similar. Nick will be able to connect you. He's our client engagement specialist. Landis is saying, as a Canadian entrepreneur, a first governing board member of Startup Canada, an angel investor, and supporter of the Kauffman Foundation. This created a perfect synergy to raise the profile of entrepreneurs worldwide. Thank you, Lance. I much appreciate that. Quick shout out to Canadian entrepreneurs. There are 2 Canadian entrepreneurs featured in the Ice House program. One of them is Brian Scudamore, the founder of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. He's in British Columbia. He started that in 2000, I forget when it was, 1998, I think, or 89, with $1,000 he had saved up as a way to pay for college. So thank you for that, Landis. Teresa, will the NC Idea training include the facilitator kit? I don't know. I don't think it does. I don't think the facilitator kit comes with it. The NC Idea is paying the fee for the training, and they're asking people who come from that to have some kind of skin in the game. So I think they're expecting you to purchase the facilitator kit afterwards. I might have that wrong, and Nick will straighten me out on that if I do. Julie, it looks like you've been writing an 8-part series on how to think and act like an entrepreneur. I see 1 and 2 on the Eli blog. Part 3 was published this morning. Julie, I failed to acknowledge it as part 3, but that's what it is. It's really about action, about taking action. So thank you for that question, Julie. Alfredo, no questions, excellent presentation. Getting ready to use with a Texas county to develop a strategic plan using small groups to identify opportunity areas to improve the quality of life in their communities. Can see how your ideas link with my approach to identifying and solving problems. I go a little further by identifying implementation roles, responsibilities, resource requirements, and time frame for accomplishment. We'll look on your website for potential training materials for a group facilitator who is familiar with the opportunity area. Thank you. Thank you, Alfredo. Much appreciate the work you're doing. Lannis, you know Brian. Yeah, he's a great guy. He's a, very typical entrepreneur. Teresa, thank you. I'll clarify next week. Okay, good questions so far. Let's see, someone got their hand raised. Okay, Juanita, we already answered your question in the here about the homeschool. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. Again, you can come to one of our facilitator trainings. We're happy to host a webinar if you want to expose these ideas to your broader team. We do one-day, half-day, one-day workshops. I do a lot of keynotes and professional development work. So any other questions? Alanis, thank you. Alanis saying, wonderful, in-depth, data-driven presentation. Thank you. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I hope to hear from each and every one of you. There's a lot more to learn here. We're at elimindset.com. I hope you have a great afternoon, morning, day, wherever you are in the world. So thank you for joining our webinar.